were curious about whether TikTok can influence an election. So our next speaker is an assistant professor in the New Media and Digital Culture Department at the University of Amsterdam, and he's going to try to answer this question for us. So welcome, Alex Gekker. Hi.
Hard act to follow after a spaceship.
I know.
Feel inadequate.
Needed to have some more elements around you. You just have the pillow going on.
Exactly. Just have good old-fashioned earthly owls.
Whenever you're ready, you can get started with your presentation.
All right. Well, let's start then. My name is Alex. I'm an assistant professor for New Media and Digital Culture at the University of Amsterdam. This talk is based on a paper I wrote with Darshna Vijay, who's a recent graduate of our research master's program. And my talk is about Sabrimala, a Hindu temple located on a hill in the southern Kerala state of India. But it is also about TikTok and playfulness and how these two can end up far less innocent than they might sound. Because you see, Sabrimala, and I want to apologize in advance for any Indian listeners, as I'm not a speaker of the language who will butchering pronunciation all the time, is a contentious topic in Indian society, one involving religion, political struggle, and activism. The gist is that it is forbidden for women to make pilgrimage to it, women of menstruating age, a decision that has been overturned by the country's Supreme Court, but local devotees blocked and harassed women who attempted pilgrimage. This is Mary Sweetie, a 46-year-old woman who tried to enter Sabrimala twice in 2018. She was turned away both times by the public and the police, and she received wide media attention as one of the first few women who attempted this feat. She also became a TikTok meme, widely played before and during the Indian elections of 2019, when an interview segment with her became a popular soundtrack for parody videos, and Indian TikTokers began mocking her speech and looks. So, when users create TikTok videos about a contentious political issue, how does the platform's design shape such expression and their circulation? What does the playful architecture of TikTok mean for the nature of its political discourse and participation? So one thing that we saw is a saffronization of the issue, with saffron being the color associated with the Hindu Nationalist Party. Through parody and mockery, strong nationalistic and anti-liberal effect was presented on the platform during the election. There was also a showing of sport, but mostly under a different hashtag, with the two not really interacting. So this showcases a classic take of political filter bubbles. Each faction owns an issue or an aspect of the topic. The notion that online spaces can be mapped out to see which group owns a particular space is not new, but even 2 decades after such research began, we see how today algorithmic recommendation platforms exacerbate the problem. Moreover, we see how even the fun and playful aspect of popular social media app known mostly for its lip-sync video and dances and pranks can hide a deeper and potentially darker underbelly. Today, no social media is free from such responsibility. This necessitates 2 frames of inquiry: play as a way of doing and play as a way of looking. The first studies the playful and silly civic practices through which citizenship is enacted, while the second sees play as transgressive force which stretches and explores the limit of political participation, laying bare the conditions of possibility. What forms of play are permissible, what are not, and to what extent. It was then not surprising that some forms of play were found wanting, and in June 2020 the Indian government banned TikTok alongside several other Chinese apps, leading to a surge of VPN software downloads in India. But once playfulness becomes dark and subversive, it's hard to limit it geographically. The focus on TikTok as potentially politically evil platform continued, with the Trump administration attempting to ban it in June of this year as well. And while currently this ban is on hold, it still shows how different actors give very different meaning to different forms and functions of play. A harmless app for the youth is seen as a Joker-like chaotic influence by the government. The case study shows the value of studying silly and playful political participation in online environments. We try to emphasize the importance of placing TikTok on the research agenda as the app gains momentum and raises policy challenges, and privacy concerns. The rapid policy changes and alarmist discussion that arose around the app by influencers, activists, and governments during the writing of this paper further stresses the urgency of this research direction. In addition to discussing the specificity and particularities of TikTok, we also identified emergent forms of political participation in the Indian context that are shaped by the platform and distinct sociocultural and political factors, in this case the saffron. Thank you, and big thanks to Darshna, who is definitely the driving force behind this paper. Feel free to ask me things in the chat or reach out to us on Twitter and buy them a beer. You don't have anything better to do, so why don't you?
Thank you, Alex. Also for supporting our virtual beers. I have a quick question for you, just a bit of an expansion on one of your slides, because you mentioned that in June, TikTok was banned in India. This was last June. Can you go a bit into the reasons behind the ban?
Yeah, sure. So the ban was part of a broader blanket ban of Chinese apps in India, and that had to do with tensions with the Chinese government, including the border tensions, actually. So this is a part of almost like a cultural boycott, right? That we are threatened by China, but that also means that we want to limit its kind of like economic and cultural power. But it also had a very real fears of Chinese. So TikTok is kind of the first big Chinese social media network globally, and while we are very much aware and by now used to our data and privacy being sold and bought by the major tech corporations, having a one that is kind of very much reliant on a authoritarian regime and is in league with the Chinese Communist Party, that rules essentially the state, the country, it is of concern to many people, right? So the idea of, for example, being able to glean some personal information and then blackmail or use it for espionage is often a kind of securitist concern that countries, India and the US made against China. But if you ask me, I think there's also like this very strong cultural saying here that we don't want a cultural export of a country that we do not share the values of.
Great. Thanks for going into detail about that. There's a question from the chat from Chloe. Do you think TikTok could play a similar role in the Netherlands during the upcoming elections?
That's a great question. First of all, let me say, I don't think that we can for sure say TikTok will cause any major events in election. It's very difficult to prove any single kind of component of a larger election pattern that is like for sure an influencing one. But I do think that it is quite fitting and fits into like a pattern of use of social media in the last couple election campaigns in the EU, the United States, and in other places where social media is used for a seemingly grassroots or maybe more often than not AstroTurf movements that use fun, mockery, kind of a cool, maybe a bit of an edgelordy factor of online communication and participation platforms to steer up political discourse and maybe like sometimes move people away from voting, maybe like advance topics that wouldn't be advanced otherwise. So I think that it's not unreasonable to watch TikTok as like a popular space for young people and check what the politics of regional TikTok and TikTokers is at any given moment and whether there are potentially bad faith actors, as the platforms like to call them, who interfere in that.
Great. So unlike Facebook, TikTok doesn't allow political ads. So how do you, you mentioned that it's not necessarily such a direct influence, but how do you see the platform influencing these political elections without the use of political ads like other platforms have?
Right. So the most obvious answer would be all like good old-fashioned sock puppets. So the idea of bodies, whether it's a person or an organization, operating multiple fake accounts, and fake in the sense that those are not genuine people, although the distinction is a bit difficult in I think when we talk about identity online. But often those are like distinct aspects of a campaign that, even not advertised as a campaign, for example, can advocate for radical ideas in funny form, right? So we all know, unfortunately, the way that like subscribe to PewDiePie meme was used by several extremists, including those who conducted mass shootings in the US and in Australia. This is an example of how a component of an internet culture, now I'm not saying that this was deliberate or that, PewDiePie in this case is responsible for this. This is an example of how like extremist speech and propaganda to some extent is tied to kind of identitarian, fun, playful aspect of a specific community, and can potentially influence people to do horrible things. And if it can potentially influence people to do horrible things, it can also potentially, and with more potential, influence them to do less horrible things. For example, consider political ideas that they wouldn't have otherwise considered.
Great, thank you. So there's a question in the chat from Vanessa about where can we read the paper that you and your colleague wrote. They would like to read more. So is it publicly available for us to read? It's in print,
which means, yeah, it is. It's in print, which means it's like waiting for the journal to, I don't know what they do, like churn their little gears or something. But you can read a preprint, which just means like it's the same paper, but without all the fancy stuff. If you go to, actually my Twitter that I linked on the last slide, Alex Gekker, one word on Twitter. And one of, I think my latest tweet is like an endorsement of this event, and it's linked to a thread where the full paper can be read.
Okay, and maybe Alex, if you, once we're done here, maybe you can also just hop into the chat on the live stream and share the link directly there.
Sure, we'll do so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.